are the major projects? So we talk about what is cognitive psychology, right? So let's talk about what are the major projects you have been involved currently, or your past projects, or what your current projects are.
Yeah, so when I was at the Air Force Academy, I was very fortunate. I came into a lab with a lot of, pardon the phrase, cool toys, right? I mean, research toys, but and one of them was an actual Tesla, right? And so we had the opportunity to be among the first labs to actually publish data with these real, quote unquote, self-driving cars.
Yes.
In somewhat of a realistic world environment, right? There's still confines we have to take to make sure that we're protecting the human subject. But we're looking at several different things, right? So one of the projects we looked at with the Tesla was the familiarity with the system and how that kind of interacts with your trust of the system. So I think a great example of this is when Tesla brought us our car, he essentially handed over the keys and said, have fun, right? And so, and so there was not this necessarily explanation of the different features so much, or, the bounds in which the system would, perform a certain task. But he just handed it over. And so I remember distinctly, one of my collaborators, Dr. Vic Finnemore, at West Virginia now, was, I think, one of the first ones to actually drive it. We went out to go use its auto parking feature. He found a spot, and I think it was 4 straight trials, the car started backing in, and he just hit the brakes. He didn't trust it to actually continue out.
Oh, right? Really?
Yeah, and so this kind of raises the question of, okay, does having any degree of familiarity of how the system's going to work dictate your willingness to rely on it, right? And what we find, is right at the beginning, when people don't know how the system's going to do it, right? When you pull into a parking spot, most of the time you're pulling in nose first, right?
Yeah.
But what Tesla does is it pulls past and then it starts backing in, but it backs in with at least a 3-point turn. And so it'll come back towards the car, or at least this is how it used to be. I don't know if it still is, but it would come towards the car, it would stop, it would straighten out, and then it would pull back in, right? And so there's this window wherein if you don't know what the system's going to do, you don't know at what point it's going to stop. Right, because it keeps getting back closer and closer and closer to that other car.
So you're kind of building a fear in your brain. Oh, I'm gonna hit this car.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's why you instinctively put your pedal on the brake.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't, like in this case, there's no real threat of physical injury.
Yeah.
But there's still issues associated with. Wrecking an $80,000 car is not great. And so, what we found is those who were given some degree of information or saw it work the first time tended not to intervene. But those who didn't have that information, over half did intervene on that first one, right? And so it's one thing in a parking environment to have that intervention. It's another thing to potentially at highway speeds have that intervention because you don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
And we see this all the time in all different domains of people overreacting to whatever stimulus is.
Yeah.
Right. So one example would be pilot-induced oscillations. Right. And so you start doing this. And so you get that even in vehicles sometimes. So we had a series of projects with the Tesla. That was obviously my postdoc. I came here. We've still continued some of those. So I'm still collaborating with some folks at the Air Force Academy.